What is the easiest thing a bad player can grab about you online that can lead to like a massive casualty or problems for you?
Your date of birth, combine that with your
Mm.
name and address, and a bad actor can open accounts, reset passwords, and impersonate you. It could be bank accounts. It could be, credit cards.
And that really quickly can like damage your credit score and all sorts of other terrible things, right?
Absolutely.
Hey y'all, welcome to Just Lookin' Out. My guest today is the beautiful and smart Jennifer Raiford, one of the top women in the world in cybersecurity. She is CEO of Globesec. She advises Fortune 500 companies, and she's also working with the U.S. National Security Telecommunications Advisory Committee as an appointee. She doesn't just influence corporations, she literally helps shape our national defense strategy. Just last month, Jennifer was recognized by Marquis Who's Who top execs for dedication, achievements, and leadership in cybersecurity. All around, total badass. Today, she's come on the show to talk about her amazing career and help us get some great tips on how we can protect ourselves online. Hey, Jennifer, I'm just so impressed with your career, and we're so lucky to have you on Just Looking Out today.
Hi, Kaylee. I'm so happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so great to see you again because when we first met, you were introduced to me as the Olivia Pope of cybersecurity. And for those that don't know, she's the lead from the hit ABC show Scandal, played by Kerry Washington. Absolutely love this analogy and comparison for you, but would love to know who gave you this nickname and why.
I guess at the time that I was doing some of the things that I was doing, there wasn't anything or no one had seen anything kind of like it, especially in the cybersecurity space. And then the show Scandal came on, and Olivia Pope was doing what people that saw me every day, or even my team, they said they saw the connection and they kept saying, "You're like the Olivia Pope of cyber." Like, and I kept going, "How are they seeing the connect?" I was trying to see it. So I started watching, fell in love with the show, but then I started to see what they were talking about. And I think it helped me to see how people saw me, in terms of I'm just in the middle of it. I'm wearing 100 different hats all at once, and I get a phone call and I go to fix that problem, or I'm, called into a war room. I'm coming with a strategy to solve something, and then I've got a team to help me execute on that. So it was very similar to what Kerry Washington was doing. So it did resonate. So later on, it kind of came up again. And then when I started working with NSTAC and the White House and all of that, they said, "See, I told you, you're like Olivia Pope of cyber and AI." So that's where that came from.
How did you end up in cybersecurity?
When I went to school, I studied global business, but I also studied information systems. Now, I will say my parents both went to technical schools. They both were, technically, my dad was an engineer, all of that. So for fun, we used to do programming. We did that for fun. So I kind of already had that
Just
technical
just a
side.
casual family, just a little family activity.
It was.
I love that. So many of us desire to have something that we love so deeply, it feels like a calling. So that is amazing to hear that you found yours. I am curious though. So when I think of the word cybersecurity, my mind goes straight to insanely complex, crazy technology. I think about the movie The Matrix, conceptually, just very difficult. Can you just help break us down in layman's terms? What is cybersecurity?
Think of it like locking your house, only your house is your phone, your bank account, and your medical records, your identity. Cybersecurity is making sure the doors and windows are locked, the alarms work, and you know who has the keys.
I love that, and it's really important to know if there is, you know, if one of those windows is being, opened or, the doors being crashed through, you need to be alerted in real time so you can take action and be able to defend or, at least take care of the experience as soon as you can, right?
Mhm.
I really like that. I'm gonna use that moving forward, but I'll give you credit, don't worry. Okay, in your email signature, you have all these fancy acronyms after your name. I literally had to ask my dear friend ChatGPT, what do each of these mean? They're very impressive, by the way. But for those that don't know, can you tell the listeners what are the credentials you have and what do these acronyms stand for?
So in a lot of ways, in a lot of cases, as I worked my way up the cyber chain, I would get these designations, meaning the first time I became a CISO, which stands for Chief Information Security Officer. So then you've got, I think one of them might be head BISO. That's when I became head BISO. Well, first I became the first Business Information Security Officer for Unisys, and then I became the head BISO, which is, the head business information security officer. And what's unique about that was because I had the experience of being a CISO and because I had done the client facing work on defense intelligence, public sector, and all, and client facing commercial, financial, security consulting arm, because I'd done that with them, and then they asked me to kind of come in and build out this other side, which was more internal. But the beauty of that was it was, again, my passion, where my passion was business, my passion was cyber, and I noticed that there needed to be a bridge. And so that's what the BISO does. It provides a bridge and allows for business and security to work together.
Educate us, right? How can we protect ourselves as just like regular old humans trying to navigate this modern digital world? What can we do or what steps can we take to be safer? What are three common mistakes everyday folks make about cybersecurity?
One is the reusing of passwords.
Mm, guilty. No, not a good thing.
No, it's
Okay.
not.
How,
And that's a
well,
mistake, right? That people think that, no, there's no problem, but actually that is a risk. And it's better to have unique passwords.
how in the world then do we keep it all straight? We've got a million logins. How do you recommend we do this if we need a different password for everything we go into?
I would say look and find some of those password managers.
Mm.
Find one that works for you, that where you're comfortable, but something like that that gives you the ability to manage it, I think is that's where I would start. Okay.
And okay, in terms of recommendation, loves that. Anything else we could be doing besides passwords to protect ourselves?
Yep, I would say being very, very conscious of information that you're
Mm.
giving, whether it's sometimes information can be in photos. Like you might be giving a photo that might show your location.
It's so
Uh,
funny that you just said that because one of my girlfriends posted she was selling something and it was the original, shipping basically label that she was given to say that this was from this store. Well, it
mhm.
had her home address in it. And I screenshotted it. This was just yesterday and I was like, "Girl, you got to take this down. Safety Kaylee does not like this." So you're right. Like just little things that maybe you don't think other people notice are actually very noticeable and they can put you at danger.
Yeah. So oversharing, anything where you're doing any kind of oversharing, especially on social media, pictures, or even telling everyone where you're going or where you are
Mm,
currently at. So to me, oversharing. Um, and then the other thing I think that people sometimes, I don't know, I almost say maybe the password reuse and this other one around the update neglect, where, um, so when I'm speaking to corporations, right, I'm always making sure that they understand. It's almost like, I'm almost kind of militant about it, is the fact
mhm.
that you need to make sure that when those updates come out, that, you are, making sure that you're taking advantage of those, right? Well, from a corporation standpoint, it means that if you're not patching, if you're not fixing, so certain things that they're putting out there to fix a vulnerability or something like that, you've now missed, right? So now that leaves you open and exposed. Well, it's the same thing for us on our phones. It's the same thing where, or on our laptops, where ignoring those software updates, it's neglect. So that's the other one. The common mistakes that, you could just be going on about your day and doing things and ignoring and ignoring and ignoring. But that's a big mistake that everyday folks that we do. So those are my big three.
So when we get the alert from Apple that they're gonna do a software install at 2 a.m., we should just go for it, do it, wake up with a better version to know that we're in a little bit better position to having our stuff protected. Is that fair to say?
That's very fair to say. And so a lot of times when you don't go into the details or realize all the different things that are a part of certain updates, right? But it could mean a major issue or breach, that they fixed and found, and they need everyone to execute on that. And you could be missing that, if that makes sense, right? Now, great. There's some awesome features that's come out of those updates sometimes, but sometimes it is simply things that you need to keep you safe.
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. And you used a specific word. You said data breach, which to me is like triggering and just such a has like a shock factor behind it. It sounds so invasive and makes you wonder, what did these people get? Or you get the email that says, you were involved in this security breach with this bank, and it's scary. Can you define for us and explain what is a data breach and how does it happen?
Yes. So basically, it's when information that's supposed to be private, like your name, address, credit card, health records, is accessed without permission. It can happen through hacking, phishing, or even someone having a laptop left behind in a taxi. The impact ranges from identity theft to reputational damage. And it is the key pieces to a breach is unauthorized access, data exposure, and then the potential impact.
I do get the email. It says, Kaylee Nitchie's information was hacked. What should I do about it if these kinds of things happen?
So, depending on the information that received, a lot of times resetting your password, a lot of times monitoring, if information has been exposed, and a lot of times they'll offer some sort of monitoring. Take advantage of that. Just by nature, especially, your personal information is now either been made, accessible, or it's the possibility that, you are vulnerable in that space. So the monitoring piece is very key.
I'm hearing a common theme and it's passwords. So I need to go back and kind of unreel myself from my current behavior because I think you're right. Like it is really important to be like on top of that and have a different one for different logins so that we can try to prevent some of this. And I need to do a better job. All right, we're going to shift gears again. I'd like to focus on just women in the workplace. I myself, I spent 15 years in corporate America. I had roles across several different verticals, and whether it was sales, I'm working in an advertising agency. I settled in enterprise SaaS for the last 6 years. And with every promotion, it became evident that at that new tier, or that new management level, it seemed like there were fewer and fewer women in positions of power. So now at my company with Safer, I am in tech and I see the gender age gap even larger. Tech just has kind of like this um, propensity to be skewed towards men. So I was curious, what is it like being a woman in cybersecurity, arguably one of the most male dominated industries?
I think that's a great question. So for me, not only was I the only person sometimes walking in the room to even be touching or talking about, cyber, because I would say I'm more on the pioneer trailblazing front end of it.
Mhm.
So, I can speak firsthand on what that can feel like, to be, a woman, a minority woman, and at the time, probably a lot of times I was the youngest, um, walking in the room, but I with this, authority, this expertise, this call to action, or even having to tell the executives what they're doing wrong or what we need to fix and why it's important, that kind of thing. So, I'll just say this. One, I feel like it's not for the weak. I feel like one of the things that I learned very early on, being a CISO, this is the first time I was a CISO, and there that we had these board meetings. Well, I wasn't invited to the board meeting. I wasn't a part of that. The CTO who I reported to was. So he kept having to go into these rooms and he was like getting pa 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 pa, just all the questions. But he wasn't the
Sure.
one doing the day-to-day job. I was the CISO, right? So he said, "Guys, you need to get Jennifer in here because that's what I'm paying her to do. And everything you're asking me about is what she's doing. So she needs to get in the room." So finally, now I'm in the room. Now, mind you, my reports have made it into the room before me. I had my boss, go and champion for me and fight for me to get in the room. So finally I get in the room and I'm like, maybe I should just be quiet, just kind of take it all in. This is my first meeting. And this is the things that women we go through, right? So I'm thinking, let me just
Absolutely.
and
We have to be softer, we have to be
as
quieter.
he pulled me aside. He says, "I fought for you to be in this room. The reason why I fought for you to be in this room is because the questions they have, you're the only one that has the answer." He said, "So don't ever sit and say nothing ever again. You are in the room because you belong in the room." After that, I never approached the situation the same. So as a woman, now I walk in a room, I look to my left, I look to my right, I'm assessing the situation, but you know what I'm also telling myself? I know I belong. Period. I belong. And so that became, I never had that situation again. And so I've had people ask me about, imposter syndrome and all. I don't have it. You know why? Because I do the work. I make sure I know what I'm talking about. That is the best way to calm any kind of fear you may have is by preparation. The other piece is I actively listen all the time, and then I make sure that what I'm doing to a level of excellence. So when I walk in a room, I can hold my head up high and be able to say, I belong. I know I belong. It doesn't matter that I might be the only woman, or it doesn't matter that there are no women at all, or I'm the only Black person. It doesn't matter because that's not what got me here today. What got me here is because of who I am and what I bring to the table. So
Hell yeah, that's amazing, and you know what? Shout out to that gentleman that fought for you to be in the room, right? We need more male champions
I
to
will say
say,
that
"Hey." Yeah, like, what a badass. Shout out to you, whoever you are.
I will also say I would not have been able to achieve and make it in my career if it were not for those mentors and those champions who fought for me to get in the room, who gave me a seat at the table. That matters as well. And in cybersecurity, that type of support matters when it comes to diversity.
Absolutely. Okay, you talked a lot about how even from a young age, you knew you wanted to be this top line executive and you wanted to be a leader. Can you tell us about why you started your own company, Globesec, in 2024?
The advisory aspect of this is, I think, where I can bring the most value. So, that is why I decided after, all of the time that I had spent and being, you name it, we're talking, Fortune 500s, Price Warehouse, Siemens, GE, being able to see and work across industries, I realized that that was the value that I had today was the actual be that advice, that ability to, like you said, the Olivia Pope of cyber and AI, it's the strategy as well as being able to fix. And at that level, that's really kind of where you can kind of see where you need to go, right? So that's what made me, pick, this as a time for me to do that, as well as I recognize that thought leaders can shift the mindset of an entire industry, right? And I might have been doing that, in each role, each company, I was doing that, shifting the mindset, changing the culture. And I realized that I could probably make a bigger impact doing it at a different level instead of just inside of one company. So that is another reason why I chose, to create a Globesec advisory. But the other part to Globesec advisory is the ability to help guide all of these organizations in how to properly implement AI, um, and being able to work with your software companies. And just because you're a software company doesn't mean you don't need a good incident response plan or a good crisis management plan, or or even helping give some advisory aspects on the early end just so they can avoid certain pitfalls, right? So that's where my passion lies, is being able to do that.
You've worked with the biggest brands, the big Fortune 500s, and taking all of that experience from various verticals and huge corporations and making that into like your own kind of secret weapon as you are able to advise multiple companies now for a new state and what does it mean to keep going in this modern world. So that's so badass. What is it like having access to things that are so top secret and um, how do you keep that, can you share that? Can you not? Are you under NDA? Tell us a little bit about that.
One of the things that I've figured out that I had learned how to do, um, from back when I was a CISO the first time, is I talked in code. So, and I still do it today. Like I'll say something, but I'll put a word into it instead of saying what the actual word is. And it's something I have tried to pull myself out. But that comes from all of the the secret, information, or the things that I've done and accomplished that I could never. I thought I would never get any credit for. You don't do this thinking you're going to be acknowledged, or win awards or get credit for it. I never thought. Matter of fact, I used to joke and I'd say I'm your best kept secret. Like that was literally what I used to say. So to come out or be pulled out to the front, that to me has been something that I've struggled with. And the things that I know, I I'm not even able to share or say, if that makes sense. So I've learned how to talk in code. That is what I've been able to, how I've been able to do it. And so I'm still very guarded in things that I'll talk about. A lot of times you'll hear me say, yeah, I went to this country. And, this country was, had ransomware.
Okay, well, it sounds like also like that would be really heavy to have to carry that in a way where you can't share it. Um, does it affect you? Do you go to therapy? You mentioned you meditate in the mornings. How do you hold all that? And then where are you finding the release?
So, it is a very good question. So I do meditate. That is very, very important for me. The like I mentioned before, the balance is important. My mindset is well, I think one of the most powerful things I have is my mindset and my ability to see things in a certain way. I definitely have the counseling and all of that in therapy. I've definitely incorporated that and put that into, what I call the life balance. Those are the things that I do now, to make sure that I maintain that. But also feeling good. I try to make sure that I feel good every day. So if it means sparkling nails and sparkling pumps or whatever that is, that in my day I can take a look and that's going to bring me to my place. I'm just giving you some of my tips, like, that work for me. But
Girl, look
yeah.
at these nails. They are always freshly done. Okay,
Right. And so I think
I hear you though.
yeah.
You have to have joy in what you're doing. Um, In order to be happy with your everyday life, right? You mentioned you do go to therapy. Do you have to speak in code there, or is that just like an open line of communication? You can just be,
Well,
say everything.
Well, even there, I speak in code if I'm talking about, which is rare, that if I'm talking about something that I've, dealing with work or whatever, I'm gonna speak in code, I'm gonna do that. But what I usually am working on or talking about is the management of everything, all things that make up Jennifer, right?
Mm-hmm.
Being able to reconcile what I'm doing, from a work perspective, and then what we talked about, how I show up as a mom, how I show up as a daughter, how I show up as a big sister, all of those things are kind of the things that I'm talking about in terms of, in my therapy. And then what does all of that mean in what I want to do, in my new relationship, so those are the kind of things that you know, I'm working on and talking about.
All right, so I'm gonna give you a situation, and you're in a major corporation with a panicked, freaked out CEO. You shared that you've been in situations like this in the past, where there is disruption is coming from, and what it's like putting all these pieces together, mapping it out, so you can understand like what of the last moves of everybody, reconfiguring where's the missing link. Is it like when you lose something and your mom asks you to retrace your steps? Like, how are you doing this thought process to figure out the bottom line for a problem?
That's a good question. So what I do typically, um, is because I'm not sure where I'm being brought into the situation. So first things I do is I like to establish a timeline. So so that's one of the first things that I'll do, because I'm not sure where we are in the process. So that's one of the first things. So the biggest piece is usually and you said, people are freaking out. Well, I'm like the opposite. I go into a different type of mode. So I'm not the one that's overreacting, but I'm the one that's kind of very calmly pulling all of that together. And one of the things, if you've ever get a chance to kind of see me in a war room, you'll see I treat it almost kind of like an orchestra almost, to where I, I know this is, how you have to try to explain how you
Yeah,
see things, so yeah, so
exactly.
that's
You're a
almost like
composer.
there you go. So, like, the whiteboard is where I draw everybody's attention, right? So, that's what I'm saying about the timeline, but I'm also gathering that information, right? So, while I'm getting that information, the first question I'm trying to understand is, has the breach been contained? So, if that hasn't happened, well, that's where I'm going first. It's like, okay, you know, whatever that piece is, and it all depends. The other thing is, I'm a big proponent of, if you've got various aspects like what database, whatever it might be, um, I like the transparency. So I kind of want to get whatever that is up on the screen so we can all be looking at it. So again, why I'm doing that is because I'm actually taking all of the different pieces and all of the energy and the chaos, and I'm bringing all of that into focus for everyone, right? So as we're talking and I'm mapping things out, we don't have to repeat it because it's already right there, right? So that part, so once someone says it, I make sure that it's been captured. And so that is a part of how I move, the process through. So once we've contained the breach, then I'm also trying to understand where there was a breakdown, if that makes sense. So whatever that is, and I want to make sure that wherever that protocol, wherever that safeguard wasn't in place, I want to make sure that that's been put in place. So one of the things about me, like even in life, I hear something, I see something, oh, okay, I see where the breakdown is. So I'll automatically start coming up whatever that process needs to be. I'm also a Six Sigma black belt. So not only do I look at it from a security standpoint, I'm also a process engineer. So I will literally figure out how we can make sure that doesn't happen again, or we put something in place to where we can mitigate the risk when it pops up. Whatever it is, I'm already thinking about that. At the same time, I'm capturing what all the information is to make sure that I'm able to articulate what we saw, what it was, and all of that. And then I may need to be able to take this information. So I'm an information kind of gatherer. Because we may need to turn around and give that to law enforcement. So I'm very big on the documentation aspect of what that incident is. The other thing is, understanding where you are in the process, what type of data we're talking about. So then there's notifying, so there's a whole process. So once I've, kind of contained the breach, I've already executed that governance mechanism, right? So there's a governance mechanism to where nothing should be stated or said that hasn't been vetted through this group. So that's your PR, your legal, the same CEO you said that was stressing out. Well, he's not stressing out in that way anymore. Now he's a part of the, oh, we have a process, we have the steps. Okay, this is what we're doing. So it's that kind of thing. So and I could be doing more than one war room. So one could be very technical, and the other one could be the legal executive um, piece. So sometimes I bounce between the two. But so that's kind of in a nutshell, containing the breach, making sure the safeguards are in place. But then it's also that whole process around notification. The last piece is anything where there was an issue or where there was a gap. I'm making sure that we're putting things in place to remediate that so that doesn't occur again.
I think it's really cool that you actually were able to tie in two completely separate things, art and technology, right? And how you treat it almost like a cybersecurity huge breakdown issue. Everybody's freaking out. You come in composed and take a deep breath, and it's almost like an art form for you, how you're putting all of the brushstrokes together and creating this amazing, beautiful picture at the end, which in turn is actually remedy for the problem. So it's really cool how you're able to connect those things. So speaking of problems and and being able to really have a formal yet informal process to figuring out what occurred. We recently saw big headlines around a massive data breach in my specific area where I'm doing a lot of my business of online safety from the T app. And they tried to make it sound like it was some folder that was left out somewhere that, oh, no big deal. These women had, even though their address was put on an interactive map, it's okay, little risk. That to me is extremely scary. Walk us through how something like this can happen and why why they aren't sharing this in the media. What do you think's going on there?
So, I'm not a part of it, but from what's been shared, it sounds like a combination of poor access controls and inadequate data segregation. And the public version often downplays the severity, right? But if location data was exposed, then that's a serious, safety risk. So I've seen a lot of situations where um, these things start, going awry, right? But it's usually there's some sort of break in your cyber program, right? So to me, it sounds like, poor access controls is probably going to be a big part of this, right? So that means like the restrictions aren't where they're supposed to be on who can access the sensitive data. So I think that's a big one.
Yeah, I was just going to ask. Permission controls, is that essentially human error? Did somebody set that up, or what does that entail?
It can be both, or it could be lack of having something even in place at all, right? And to be able to even have proper access around sensitive data, you've got to identify where that data is, right? So you've got to
Mhm.
make sure it's properly classified. So that's a part of that. But if you've got a good program, where you've kind of identity and the access and least privilege, all of that's been applied and you know what type of data you're dealing with, then those things get addressed through that. If you don't and you haven't started asking those questions, then it's a strong possibility that you don't have the proper controls around, right? So that's a part of it. Um, and then, how where the data is and how you properly separate that information across users and all of that. So if that makes sense. So there that's important. I'm not sure that was in this case. It doesn't sound like that it was. So that's a big piece. I'm not saying that they purposely are downplaying or didn't, provide the information in such a way. And what I try to do is I try to build the muscle of my clients when it comes to incidents and crisis management. So if you haven't stepped through that in a way, then you may not know the timelines and the requirements and all the players may not know their roles, right? So I mentioned in the scenario that you gave me, I mentioned I made sure that there was a different type of war room happening where the executives knew what they were supposed to do, right? So now they're calm, or we're waiting on this. Okay, this goes out once everyone's approved it, that kind of thing. Well, it's the same thing with, like this app breach where they're having those conversations and they may not have been prepared for how do we step through such a thing. So do you have the proper controls? Do you have the right data segregation? But also, do you know what the steps are and the timelines that you have, you know, in terms of reporting and that kind of thing? And then I think the last piece is, and I've seen this before, that never goes well when you don't share. We're in a day and a time with all organizations of all sizes, across the board and industries that have been, have been exposed or had to deal with some sort of breach or something like that. The notification process is critical because you can lose that respect if they feel like you're not being forthright, if that makes sense.
It sure does. Like, transparency is so important
Absolutely.
here, especially when we're dealing with people's personal information. And in this particular case, location data, I would argue, is, critical, um, in order to be super visible, like, this is what happened. So they ended up, I believe it was vibe coding was blamed at the end of the day for the breach. And can you just describe to us first, what is vibe coding?
So, vibe coding is a style of AI assisted programming where developers focus on describing described, outcomes rather than writing the actual code. So, basically allowing the LLM to generate, execute, and refine the software. The problem with that is, I'm going to get on my, global ambassador role is responsible AI, right? So you're talking about people's locations and different things like that, right? So why would we not want to make sure that we would have the same protocols that we would, expect, the programmers to do? Why would we not put that on how we're, executing and leveraging AI? So that human in the loop needs to be a part of it. And just describing how the program works and not vetting that and validating that to make sure that that code is secure and safe, to me, is not responsible. So, could it be a culprit? Sure, it could be a culprit. But at the end of the day, I think we have a responsibility to, as we code, to do the same thing that we've always been expected to do, which is make sure that we're doing it responsibly, but we're also making sure it's secure and that there's a human involved at every layer to help oversee that. So there should never be a time when the human isn't a part of that. And as we are developing, we are putting things in an assistive mode so that we are not setting something up to do it autonomously and it be incorrect, right? So that's my take on it.
So they say that there's no bad press, right? And I think we saw that here because the T app actually became the number one app in the Apple Store for a few days, which begs the question, do you think people take their data seriously enough or even think about how they need to protect themselves online?
I'm going to say this. I'm not sure that people take it as serious as, they should. But, you're talking to someone who kinda
Lives and breathes, yeah.
that gets on the soapbox quite often. So, yeah, so I do think that that's a big piece to it. But, for me, I've literally gone to countries where ransomware has disabled a country. So I see it differently. I've seen how it can impact a company and the employees that work for the company. So I see it. I also see how, um, our critical infrastructure, how important that is and what that can mean. We've seen the shows and the movies where, something, attacks our critical infrastructure in a movie and you've seen what it looks like, right? So that to me is how I see it. But do I think people on a whole take their data serious? Not always. Like I said, I think sometimes they think it's happens to somebody else or it doesn't impact them, if that makes sense.
It sure does. So I'm going to give you the platform here. If you go on your soapbox, can you tell us what is the easiest thing a bad player can grab about you online that can lead to like a massive casualty or problems for you?
Your date of birth, combine that with your
Mm.
name and address, and a bad actor can open accounts, reset passwords, and impersonate you.
And when you say accounts, what kind of accounts are we talking about?
It could be bank accounts. It could be, credit cards.
Mm.
Yeah,
Yeah, and that really quickly can like damage your credit score and all sorts of other terrible things, right?
absolutely.
What are some of the worst case scenarios we haven't seen yet that we may end up encountering in our lifetimes if bad actors get away with things they're attempting to steal or fraud?
I would say coordinated attacks that kind of blend, I wanna say AI driven misinformation and infrastructure disruption, to me, that those are a blackout. I kind of was talking about some of the some of the movies that we've seen,
Mhm.
blackouts, fake news, having those coordinated attacks kind of thing. Something like that is like one of those worst case scenarios. But, I wanna say the AI-driven misinformation, having those sophisticated fake content things, that appear authentic and not being able to tell a difference, I think that's gonna be a big part of it. Infrastructure disruption, the critical systems being taken offline or compromised, and then also the coordinate being able to they're having all of that happen all at once, the multiple attack vectors being deployed simultaneously.
And that sounds very terrifying if there are coordinated attacks to dismantle multiple channels of communication, or now we're not getting our news and we're not able
No
to know what's going
phones, no
on.
TV, yes, all of that. Yep, yep,
I
yep.
mean, the panic I have when I can't even find my phone in the other room, let alone the panic I have when I'm unable to literally know what's going on in the world, right?
Exactly.
Okay, so I'm sure that you have encountered some crazy scandals, pun intended. Um, what is one that you can share with us? How did you fix it? And just give us all of the details that you can.
Um, so one okay, so I've got a few, but,
Okay.
but one, and believe it or not, that I will never forget was, um, a data center was overheating because not because of an attacker, believe it or not. It was, like the maintenance, air conditioner people did something, knock something out, and so the air condition, of all the cooling in the data center was going out. And you wouldn't believe how something just that small, what that created. And so now, as the systems, were starting to overheat, like all of the everything starts shutting down. Like, like outages are being created. And that was a very chaotic time, and once again, it was, kind of what you were describing, the CTO, and all of the various, people are like, "My thing is, my database, this," everybody's like, and to your point, it was a kind of what I described before, not necessarily a war room, but it was almost the same thing because it was having to bring some harmony to the chaos, right? And getting everybody we basically had to schedule the fixes, right, as we went through it. And the failing over, having to fail over from one over to the other center and having to do that for everything, right? Everything in the current data center having to fail over. So I remember that one because it probably was the most there was no plan for that. They had never it was no one ever thought that would ever be a thing. I was telling you that I collect all the information. So I was basically running shifts. So people, they were coming in. It was a round the clock thing. And all of the labor that was tied to that. I was tracking all of that, and I had my team tracking all that. I took that, turned that into what would have been a case, right? And that case then, so that was, remember I said sometimes you got to hand it off to law enforcement. In this case, this was to legal because um, all of the impact, we don't think about those things, but all of the impact that it caused and, the failing over and the people working around the clock. And so I tracked all of that. And I think at that point, that's when I realized I really had a gift for crisis management, and the CTO, that's one of the reasons why he fought for me, to be in the room, and that kind of thing is because he had seen me in action, in terms of fixing the problems, but also coming up with those strategies when we needed that to happen and keeping everybody on an even keel. That is I have a lot, but that one sticks out because um it wasn't an attack from that perspective, but yet it caused all systems to go down. So yeah.
And when you don't have like a manual in place, like these are the 8 steps that we do to rectify, right? You're basically starting at ground zero to quickly figure it out and come up with a roadmap with how do we resolve this.
Right. Once we figured out the best thing was for us to fail over to our other center, right? So once we figured that part out, we had a playbook for that. But like I said, getting, first understanding what it was, figuring out what caused it, seeing how that was impacting the systems, understanding what do we want to keep playing with that, wait for that, or do we want to go ahead and take action? And and coordinating those, failovers is the approach that we took. So yeah, it was. I've got stories, but yeah, that one that one
I'm
I will
sure
never
you do.
forget.
They all involve like high cortisol levels and chaos, I'm sure, right?
Right.
But Jennifer, thank you so much. This was incredible. You were so educational and insightful. This was very helpful. Appreciate you coming on. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me, and it's been a pleasure.
And for the people out there that listen, where can they find you on social?
Jennifer.Raiford on Instagram, and I think it's just Jennifer Raiford on LinkedIn.
Jennifer Raiford with all those beautiful, long, cool acronyms afterwards. Thank you so much. It was
Thank
such a
you.
pleasure.
Thank you, Kaylee. Thank you so much.
Well, I hope you all enjoyed this episode and that you learned some useful tips on keeping yourself safer online. I know I have. And I love to hear your comments. Follow me on Instagram at Kaylee Nitchie and let me know what you thought of today's episode. Did you know that you can listen and watch Just Lookin' Out? We just launched our YouTube channel at Just Lookin' Out Podcast. And don't worry if you didn't get all of that. You can find all this info in the episode description as well as a link to apply to be a guest. The Just Lookin' Out podcast and content posted by Safe Her Studios LLC and Kaylee Nitchie is presented solely for general information, educational, and entertainment purposes. The use of information on this podcast or materials linked from the podcast or related sites or social media is at the user's own risk. It is not intended as a substitute for advice of a physician, professional coach, psychotherapist, or other qualified professionals' diagnosis or treatment. Users should not disregard or delay in obtaining medical advice for any medical or mental health condition they may have and should seek the assistance of their healthcare professionals for any such conditions.